sense, which is timely and relevant for their talk today, as they take us through a positioning project retrospective, easy for you to say, through the next 30 minutes. So please welcome James Domain Pipe and Josh Bradley to the stage.
Thanks, Harvey. Cool. Hey, everyone. Thanks very much for joining. I know we're the first session back after lunch, so, let's raise the energy levels a little bit. Let's start by, raising your hand if you have met somebody new today. Cool. That's good. Josh and I have met for the first time today in real life, even though we've been working together for the last couple of years. Okay, so who has worked on a positioning project over the last couple of years as well? Let's see a raise of hands for those. Great, so a lot of people. Again, it was one of the top challenges, top things for product marketers in the report, so that makes a lot of sense. And then let's raise our hands if you've been through a positioning process that actually probably didn't go so well. Again, almost a lot of people. So hopefully by the end of the day, you'll be able to walk away with some tips to help you run more effective and efficient positioning processes. Cool, thanks very much. So my name is James Domain Pipe. I'm a senior product marketing manager at Remote, and I also run a newsletter for startup marketers called Building Momentum. Josh is the VP of marketing at Netacea, and previously he was VP of demand generation at Shippermax, which is where we worked on the positioning project together. Josh, thanks very much for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Looking forward to kind of telling everyone about our journey. I didn't put my hand up when you said, have you had an unsuccessful positioning project? So yeah, looking forward to diving into the details. Nice.
Cool. So today we're going to be talking about a positioning project that we ran for a company called Shippermax last year. We're going to host a brief retrospective. We're going to look at what worked well, what could have gone better. We'll leave you with our tips for running successful positioning projects. I think because Josh is a demand generation marketer, it's not often a voice we hear from in product marketing conferences. So it'll be really interesting to hear that perspective as well as that from the product marketing point of view. So Josh, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction to your role at Shippermax and why you decided to do a positioning project?
Sure. So as James mentioned, I headed up the demand gen function at Shippermax. Small business, so was wearing multiple hats, kind of focused on demand gen, brand, and as an organization, we started to go through a lot of changes. We had significant investment, so off the back of that, the business was growing, significant investment into the product development, launching new products. The business naturally started to evolve. Our kind of market started to grow out as well. And really the context of this positioning project was born out of the need to really kind of bring our messaging in line with the new ICPs we were targeting. We had pretty poor conversion rates across the site, and I say an uninspiring site. It served its purpose when we were a much smaller business. We saw quite low conversion rates as well, so we wanted to see a kind of significant improvement naturally as a demand gen marketeer. So those were the big things that kind of drove us to kick this project off.
Yeah. And so this was actually my second time working with Shippermax. I'd worked with them the first time just after they'd raised seed funding, and they had 3 different segments they were trying to test out and try to go to market with and see what worked well. But after their Series A, that's when we worked together to basically, they'd found traction with a particular customer, and it was time to double down and really take the whole thing to market. So just for some context, we used a framework that I do use for positioning called customer value positioning, and it's basically built on the concept that being the thing for someone is so much more valuable than being something for anyone. And so Josh, how did you find that process?
Yeah, it was a very good process to follow. James introduced a framework that, for me, having never worked on a product marketing exercise before, positioning or messaging, it kind of a very clear 5 or 6 step framework that really set us from the point of beginning. It gave us a clear runway, so to speak, to get the results that we wanted to. So I think myself and kind of the leadership team within Shippermax found it very useful to follow. as relative novices when it came to positioning, it was really, really good to follow a clear-cut process like that.
Cool. And there's a ton of different positioning frameworks that you can use. We heard from April Dunford this morning with her super obviously awesome framework, which is great book to read if you've not done that before. Okay, so let's dig into the retrospective a little bit more. So let's start with what didn't work so well. So obviously we were doing this through a pandemic, which meant lots of online whiteboards, lots of Zoom workshops. What from your perspective, what didn't work so well for you?
As James said, it was kind of all conducted over Zoom, and when we started, we ran quite long workshops, right? It was, we tried to kind of do the kickoff I think we had three-hour workshops, and it was...
Yeah, so 3 hours is definitely too long to do Zoom video calls for. Do not attempt that.
Yeah, and this is before Zoom fatigue even existed, really, before the pandemic, so...
Yeah. So we switched to then doing hour-and-a-half sessions, which were much more easier to do, much more energy in the room, virtual room, I guess. I think as well, when we talked about after the process, we didn't particularly do any testing of the messaging. From a demand generation point of view, how would that have helped you in that process?
I think, that would have, I was happy with the outputs that we really kind of went to market with in the end, but I think it would have just given us a bit more insight, and I think that's, testing throughout any process is important, whether it's kind of messaging or kind of any campaign that you're launching. So perhaps something we overlooked, we might have eked out a wee bit more kind of insight into some of the personas we were targeting, but it's something I would highly recommend as well throughout the process.
Yeah. And since then, so I think we finished up in kind of the early part of last year, but now there's tools like Winter, which you can use to test messaging with a B2B audience, which I don't think it existed back then. So again, now there's much more tools that we can use to help validate that process. On those Zooms as well, they were quite crowded, weren't they? We did start off with a lot of people in the room.
Yeah, it was, we had people from product, people from marketing, sales, engineering. It was a kind of really big team to begin with, which was good for setting the context, getting lots of insight and information across the organization. But as we'll come on to talk about a bit later, it's much better to have your kind of core concentrated positioning team. So I think, start big, but definitely kind of get comfortable being narrow with a kind of key team early on.
I think that's something that I've learned throughout that process as well, is that, at the start, we do want to get a lot of broad insight from the teams that we work with. So whether that's product marketing, sales, marketing, customer success, the executive team, but we can't do positioning by committee at all. We have to get those voices in really early, and then when it makes sense, narrow the team to just those who have the core influence, I guess, and the deciding factors throughout that.
Yeah, agree.
Cool. So now let's look at the flip side. What particularly worked really well? So for me, there was one point after the session where you said, doing customer interviews was, a complete light bulb switch moment. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I guess coming into the project, I wasn't really sure, what degree of, will we kind of decide all the messaging internally with this kind of big working committee? Will we involve customers? How will that work? And having not run a positioning and messaging project before, I was, I guess, naive to the involvement of customers. But when we went out, we conducted, I think, 15 customer interviews. I say customers, but it was a mix of customers, prospects, people kind of who fitted that ICP buyer profile as well. And it transformed the whole project for me personally. The insights that we got into the assumptions that we had made before around what was it that mattered to these people we were trying to sell to, and kind of being able to compare and contrast what we thought versus the reality of what our customers and our prospects wanted and needed was just amazing. So that was, I think it would have been a completely different project had we not done that.
I know, I absolutely agree. One of the things we've heard a lot from today, from the session from Spark earlier, from Meta, was, put in place a regular customer, voice of customer program. Make sure you're continually using those insights. Positioning isn't just a one and done thing that is set. It's something that has to evolve as well. And doing that without customer insight is really difficult. I think one of the worst things that we can do is position based on the assumptions that we have internally. We're all super close to the product to the features, to the best customers that are using it, but we're not necessarily in alignment really with customers at the top of the funnel. And so there's a lot more work we need to do there to understand the broader market that we can be selling to. So through the process, the framework I use is relatively structured. We start off with looking at our best fit customers and getting out all of the assumptions on paper through a custom empathy map. We then go through to interviews, we go through to creating personas, then coming up with the value messaging that we're going to use for the product messaging. How did you find the overall structure? How did that help through the process?
Yeah, like I said, the kind of 5-6 stage process it helped break everything up into kind of segments, and you could see how we were solving a complex puzzle, in kind of small bite-sized chunks, rather than thinking we've got this enormous positioning and messaging project, where do we start? It really helped us kind of understand the landscape and start to plug some of the kind of research and ideas or feedback from customers that we were receiving into like messaging themes, for example, which then we were able to extrapolate into the product and kind of web messaging, email, etc. So I think the thing that kind of sticks in my brain is there was a clear like pathway to success and an outcome, and it was broken down in bite-sized chunks, so it wasn't too daunting once you put that structure in place. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. So there's actually a really interesting question that's come up on the Slido. How did you pick the 15 customers and prospects to interview so that it wouldn't skew your finding towards one particular segment? So from the outset, we had used the concept of a best fit customer. So this is not necessarily an ideal customer profile. It's a bit before that. We're trying to say, out of all the customers that we could potentially work with, what do we think is going to be right for our business now and maybe over the next 6 or so months? And then use that in mind as we go and interview people that fit that, but also just, the halo effect around that, people that broadly fall into those sessions. But I think one of the things from the customer interviews that you said you would have found really helpful is practicing them as well.
Yeah, I think in terms of kind of tips to other people who are considering doing this process is think about the structure of your interviews beforehand. Plan out your questions. I think we had 12 or 15 questions, but we whittled that down to in 45 minutes, what are the 6 most important questions that we want to get answers to? What does success look like? What does failure look like? Personal and professional goals, but do a bit of practice. I'd definitely recommend, whether it's someone in your team or, a friend, go through that kind of interview process before, because it took me 5 or 6 interviews before I was really able to tap into the real valuable stuff, probing into, well, why did you give that response? And the nuggets of information that we were able to pull out by just going a bit deeper were that was the most valuable stuff, I felt.
Yeah. And so in the interviews as well, we looked at 4 main sections. So the first part is segmentation. So who is the person we're speaking to? What's their role? The next part is very broad problem discovery. We're asking them questions about their broad, day-to-day, what happens, what are the professional and personal goals that they have, before then talking a bit more about the specific problem area that we want to focus on, and then giving a quick validation session as well of the thing we're thinking of building. I think what worked really well for this particular project was focusing on the broader, part of who our customers are. There's the definition of positioning is about, occupying a space in the mind of your customer. And I don't, honestly believe how we can do that effectively unless we know what else is happening in their head, what else is going on in their lives. So by focusing on broader jobs, pains, gains, and triggers, I think, we weren't just looking at this really discrete product area, but it was actually looking at how our product fitted into the whole of their working life, really.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was one of the more challenging questions that we had to ask. What are your professional goals? But then when we're in an interview with a kind of CEO of a freight forwarding company, I'd ask him, well, what are your personal goals, and kind of how does your job impact your personal life? And that's when you get the real kind of insights into, well, creating emotional kind of messaging that will resonate with those people. So
yeah, I think there's one really interesting thing that stood out for me is that we're trying to ask technical buyers, senior technical buyers, what they wanted to achieve. And you might normally think, oh, they've got their, they all think about budget, they think about capability and feature-rich stuff. But actually, we were able to find out that they wanted to be seen as an industry thought leader. They wanted to be seen internally within their business as someone who could contribute to the business growth, even though they were just in the IT and the operational side.
Yeah.
And so I think we're able to tag on to that really heavily in the messaging that we used to bring it nicely around to something that was really aspirational, but also easy to sell.
Yeah, I agree. I think we had 4 products that we were kind of ultimately covering, so we were able to pull out on a kind of number of different themes, and like you said, tap into that aspirational stuff, which really helped. When marketing, it's automation software for logistics, so it can be a bit dry, but we managed to inject some real creativity and kind of emotion into that messaging.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. So let's move on to some tips that we might give to other people in similar situations. So, lots of people in the room are product marketers. They're trying to do positioning with the rest of the marketing team and find something that works for the broader business. How can product marketers work with demand generation teams to do better positioning projects?
Yeah, so I think for me, this was the first time I had experience working with a product marketing team, and for me, it's a kind of super valuable experience. I think it was mentioned in one of the earlier chats, there should be a partnership at whatever level. I think it was product marketing and brand. It should be the same for product marketing and demand gen. The thing that scares demand gen marketers are high CPAs, poor conversion rates, poor engagement with content, and I think product marketers can have a massive influence on improving all of those areas for demand gen marketers by getting involved in campaign creation early doors, testing, coming with customer insights, testing various kind of messaging streams, whether that be through your kind of paid media, email marketing, kind of website landing pages, get them involved at the start of campaigns, and I think it's the difference between generating 200 grand or 5 million from a particularly big campaign, just if that messaging works and resonates. So I think early involvement, they're a key part of my team now moving forward. So.
Yeah, I think that's also really interesting for product marketers to keep in mind, is that the messages we create aren't necessarily just going out into the ether. We're not just putting them on the website. We have to enable the rest of the marketing team to use them in their settings, within their processes, within their deliverables and outputs. And so I think that's also really interesting.
Yeah, I think you give a good tip as well, where especially when you want to enable your sales team or the demand gen team, it's give real life examples, right? This is what the customer said. This is why this matters. It's straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And that's what I felt helped click with my team in particular. This is what a leader in this business is actually saying, and that puts a completely different spin on the messaging you're using for paid media and email, etc. So.
Yeah, I think that's also something that we talked about before, but bringing executive teams into the process as well. So in the Shipmax project, we worked with the VP of sales, yourself as the VP of demand gen, the CEO was in the process, the CTO was involved for some of it, but we really had to reduce the gap between our customers and the rest of the business, the people that were in power, the people that have decision-making power. And again, it's about spreading empathy, spreading customer awareness, and involving people across the rest of the business. Product marketing has, often is the voice of the customer. That we don't have to be the only people to understand what that means. So, things like sharing video interview notes with the rest of the team, sharing voice clips, and anything you can do to make that empathy much more real inside the business really does make a big difference. I think as well, we talked a bit about creative messaging and how we can use that in demand generation, but there was something from the Shipmax experience that I think was really good about going back to that emotional connection. We're able to, because we did have customer interviews, we had a lot of text that we could use from the transcriptions, from all that kind of stuff, from the notes. And so we're able to use some of that real language in the website itself. And that obviously always makes for a much stronger conversion case. The messaging is real, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was you have this mountain of information that you can just translate into, well, messaging that we thought would kind of cut through and make a real difference. And you kind of see that in the strapline and stuff that we came up with. I felt like it's, compared to what we had previously, it really just kind of made a difference to who we were targeting.
Yeah. And again, it's, data entry automation, AI is, again, it's not the most exciting thing, but, by being really real with the human language that we're using, on the homepage it says, at last, data entry automation across your entire business. That's not normal language that you'd see on a tech-heavy sales website, would you? It's not something that is about features, it's about the outcome, the real-world value that ultimately we can deliver. We talk about competitors in that same hero section, and we say that, we work in a way that other competitors just can't. We're really using everyday language to explain our differentiation through that messaging as well.
Yeah, we described kind of a competitor, I say a competitor, but a competing technology as kind of vanilla OCR was the I think we pulled that, did we pull that from an interview?
From a customer interview, exactly. So, and it makes it so much stronger, it's so much more nicer, and it's also easier to get everyone consistent on that message. It's much more fun as well.
Yeah, no, it definitely stuck kind of and floated around the business and still is now to this day. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so let's move on to the last thing we want to talk about. We talked a bit about how product marketing can help demand gen teams through messaging and positioning. You talked about some of the challenges. If you had a product marketer today, what's the first 3 things that you would say could help your teams tomorrow?
I think a consistent cadence of working together, providing constant insights, updates from customers. I'm now working in a different business where I don't have a product marketer, and I'm looking to recruit one as well. So, I think having that insight that's constantly, what are our customers saying? What are their kind of pains, gains, triggers, etc.? How can we transform that into, everyday messaging across email, across the website, etc.? That to me is kind of the number one thing that I would ask for. I think, just that consistent cadence, kind of workshops, updates, working together on, like I said earlier, on a campaign process to test messaging, getting feedback from them, what do customers think of this, that for me are 2 big things that would make a massive difference to the work we do as a demand gen team.
Yeah. I think, if we were to switch it back the other way, in my experience as a product marketer, we would love to hear about how messaging is being used in the real world and how that's performing, because that's not often a feedback loop that we have set up naturally. We push messaging out there and we expect teams to use it, but it's always really helpful to have that feedback loop come back round and tell us, well, this campaign didn't actually hit the mark. Why might that have been? Let's look into that a little bit more. Maybe the segmentation was off, the targeting. Maybe it's the angle from the session earlier as well. And again, that comes back to collaboration. It comes back to working better with, the rest of the team.
Yeah. No, listen, completely agree. One of the, what I do now with my current team is before any campaign, it's setting up. The first thing that we do is a messaging evaluation from similar campaigns. What worked well, what didn't work well on kind of various channels. And we actually, before we even start anything, before we start planning the content, before we start looking at kind of paid media, it's a kind of dissection of the existing messaging, where does that fit, and having a product marketer as part of that process is vital. So, absolutely, if you can, go and engage with your demand gen teams, kind of ask to be part of that campaign development process, because it will supercharge their results as well, and they'll be very thankful of your input.
And ultimately, everyone's happy in that experience.
Yeah.
Nice. Have we got some time for questions?
We do. I think I got the 5-minute nod, so.
Okay, so let's pick, maybe you want to answer this question. We talk a lot about positioning for each persona, but how do you practically speak to those personas across broader marketing channels? So at ShipperMax, for example, we talked about, personas for technical buyers, technical evaluators, and business buyers. How did you put those out across marketing channels?
Yeah, I mean, with a lot of testing, we couldn't do everything at first. You know, we took just a general approach, right? We looked at the technical buyers, the business buyers. We started to once we built the positioning or the messaging for each of those channels or each of those personas, we just started to test them on various landing pages through some kind of email cadences that we built as well. So small iterations, there was no kind of big bang. This is definitely the solution for all of them. So small incremental testing was the kind of process that we did follow. But like you said, it takes time, right? This all evolves. You start a positioning and messaging project, that's not going to be the answer for 6 months' time, right? You just constantly need to test and, you know, test on each channel, test with those personas continually. So.
Yeah, and that brings you on to the next question, the latest one. You know, we didn't do messaging testing. We should have done, and we will do it in the future. But what are some of the most improved engagement and conversion metrics that you see when you really have a good, strong handle on positioning?
Yeah, so CPA, definitely see a significant improvement. So you're going to reduce your ad spend as well. Well, reducing your ad spend, which is a big thing for the team as a whole, and certainly the leadership in the organization. Better engagement and feedback on content as well, which is extremely beneficial for the content team, and just overall better conversion rates on kind of landing pages, the campaigns that we were running, which resulted in a much stronger and healthier pipeline. So like I said, all the stuff that spooks demand gen teams the most.
And then from the product marketing point of view, it's things like win rates, it's things like time to close, it's conversion rates throughout the sales funnel, for example, that we should see tweaks here and there. Often the positioning process is going to target specific parts of that funnel. So we might have a top of funnel positioning project where we're trying to go from super broad market and find the right number of customers that we're interested in. Sometimes it will be a bottom of funnel positioning challenge, and it's how do we convert more of this specific type of customers into paid users. And again, every project is really different. That's something I've found with the companies I work through. Again, it's about being really clear about what are the outcomes you're hoping to achieve through positioning. Don't just do it because it sounds like a good idea or because the CEO thinks it's the right thing to do. That's a recipe for, failure, basically. But when you're very discreet about what it is you're trying to achieve and how you want to go about that change, everything works really well.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, I think that's all we've got time for. Josh, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much, James.
Nice. I hope you found this session really useful and take something away today. Again, just say thanks to Rose and the product marketing team for putting on today. It's been so nice to meet product marketers in real life again. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much.
The Product Marketing Alliance membership is an incredible resource for product marketers with all types of experience.
It's definitely a goldmine of information and resources, from the Slack community to the templates and resources.
I can go out and see how are other people thinking about their growth strategies or product adoption. How are others thinking about the best ways to do customer interviews, or how others are setting up the content and customer advisory boards.
There's some great real life examples that I can either make a copy of or take as inspiration and really make my own.
Getting access to the videos and the templates is more than worth the cost, because you get to see what the top PMMs are doing and how they think.
From persona frameworks to go-to-market templates to articles written by experienced product marketers, this content has become an additional resource to help me succeed at my job.
My personal favorite is the Mentorship Program. It's definitely been a game changer for me.
When I have some planning time available, I love to look at the different videos and conferences that they have posted. I always love to hear how other companies are handling some of the challenges and opportunities that product marketing has.
I could then figure out what's the best way to adapt for us, as well as look at how other people are implementing them. So I can ultimately do the work of 5 individuals as a solo PMM.
Whether you're just transitioning into the field or you're a product marketing expert, I think there's content and materials that are useful for everyone.
And as someone looking to break into the role, I get a good grasp of what I should be doing and also what will make me successful once I do.
And the best thing is that as members, we get access to new content all the time. PMA constantly keeps adding more materials, articles, and tools.
This whole program's been very validating for me in my career.
And so I highly encourage you to check out.
I believe they keep pushing the bar and supporting their members to ensure that we become experts in the field.
Different teams that you need to react to, because product marketing is kind of a bit of a shape-shifting team. It fills gaps where there aren't initiatives happening. You have to sort of do that dance around who owns pricing or who owns sales enablement or positioning, which has been a big theme of today. So I think one of the most important things I'll be doing is defining what that's going to be for Pleo, and then doing that whole like internal roadshow of going and trying to explain that to everyone and sell that dream.
What it looks like. It's funny, I mean, it's obviously a very, very different business to Equifax, slightly related, regulated, but I'm also in a situation where I'm having to sort of describe or tell people that they need to be product-led, but help show them what that is. I'm looking at my leader in the middle of the room as I do that.
So are you shifting to product-led at the moment?
We're, so dare I say it, we were famous about 3 or 4 years ago for, in retrospect, having a malicious cyber attack. And in that journey, Equifax realized that it's time to shift into cloud, for a whole lot of obvious reasons. But I think someone very smart at the time called out the fact that as you do that, if you're sales-led and you consider yourself customer-centric, the next level version of that is actually product-led. And for some reason, I think everyone agreed with that, but of course, no one has an idea what that means. So a very, very small number of new people have arrived in the business, in order to be able to help shape that. But I think this is, Equifax is 122 years old.
Wow.
It does well by having some very, very strong, close relationships with financial service providers, insurers, provides vital information in customer journeys, regulated customer journeys specifically. But normally what happens is sales will take requirements to technology. So we'd like to bank the contract, you'll have to build that. And so rinse, repeat, do that over and over and over again. And so if you're the CTO or you're leading tech, you're suddenly facing this massive, massive spaghetti of variations on a particular product. So a big part of my job, heading product marketing, in marketing is to try and create a little bit more discipline around how do we actually repeat what we're doing, make one thing saleable to many, as opposed to customizing for a few, which is difficult to be able to scale. But I'm also in a bit of a cultural desert when it comes to understanding what product marketing means.
If anyone finds the magic answer, please.
Yeah,
please
let me know. Please get in touch. Absolutely. One of the questions I'm interested in, and no doubt you're trying to build your budgets as well. It's a new area, and if product marketing sort of straddles demand gen, if demand gen isn't strong, or brand, or anything funnel or pipeline related, when it comes to sales, how do you how do you think about spending your next £1,000? What does that look like?
£1,000. Okay, so because product marketing doesn't need the most money in the marketing org is my view. I probably shouldn't say that. Okay. But I'd say so you can be quite frugal and get a lot for your money. So if I had £1,000, I would say I'd maybe get a great copywriter to come do some messaging framework work. Maybe I might run some user interviews and use that money for incentives. I might run a couple of tests on something like Winter, which is really good, like a really quick and dirty way of getting insights. But yeah, using it in scrappy ways primarily to be how can we bring in insights? But also, yeah, £1,000 is quite a lot if you're looking for some time-boxed, good copywriting support as well.
So, what would be interesting? What if you had £1 million? How would that change your approach? You're facing series.
£1 million
you're getting famous,
product marketing
you're
budget.
You're a unicorn. You need to think like.
Can I have it on a head count? Can it just be a team? I don't know. Other than that, I don't know. Maybe just you start building a world-class research and insights department. Because there are some amazing specialists you work with, and when you get to that sort of budget, you then unlock the ability to access some of the best sort of consultants in the world in really specialist areas, be it jobs to be done or pricing, and start really sort of building that as a department and becoming because product marketing should be very strategic in a company. It shouldn't be reactive. It shouldn't be operational on its own. And so I think where it can become strategic is because it goes and collects insights from all these different places. And so I would create that as a £1 million department.
So that's what it could look like in a couple of years, maybe, depending on how your series go.
Let's see.
Listen, I'm going to take a couple of questions here. I'm really struggling to decide on whether or not I should answer the first one, which is most popular, which is what my favorite color is. I might leave that to the end if it gets more votes. If it gets to 10, I will absolutely answer that. But I'll take the second one that might be a little bit more relevant from Kelly, which is, what advice would you give to someone building their first product marketing team? So, and that's equal to one from Anonymous, whoever that is. Do you expect to start with generalist PMMs or specialist ones? Which I think you could probably join those two questions up. And then there's a question on how do you encourage sales to stop promising features to get to the contract, which I can sympathise with, by the way.
It's never going to happen, is it?
Why don't we start with that one, and we can work backwards as a product marketing bingo.
Well, I am a slight believer in that marketing and go-to-market, so sales included, can start telling the story of the product maybe 6-12 months out, keeping it quite loose, but telling that story of where your product is going, so that then when the features do start coming, it feels very natural to your customers of oh yeah, of course they've shipped that because I thought they already did that, or that's part of their whole narrative. I think specifically selling features is probably to be avoided because you're just going to end up with churn pretty quickly. But I think starting to hint in it, or I think it's fine to. I've worked with VPs of engineering who actively encourage that, who say, yeah, hold us to account. Go and say to that customer that feature is coming in 3 months, so that we don't let that slip. I think it's good for accountability in some way. But yeah, shouldn't sell features that don't exist if the customer thinks they're going to get them from day one.
And how do you explain that to people that don't understand what that means, or why not?
What is into why they shouldn't do that?
Why they shouldn't sell features?
Well, I mean, I guess you shouldn't sell just features, and the last talk talked about the importance of selling outcomes rather than features, as in how this is going to change your life or save you money or save you time. But yeah, specifically to certain features get retired or features deteriorate, or other competitors come and release better versions of those features. So I don't think you ever want to sell it on just one. I think you want to sell them the dream of your overall product and also what you're about as a company.
Yeah. There's a number, so something from Joe 1. What's the biggest difference between being a PMM and a PMM leader for you? I can start. I can make a start.
Yeah, please do.
A bit of oxygen. I think for me, I mean, the division between leadership and management, or the doing is. I think Sparks made the comment. You need to try and build an element of trust, in the team. And I think the struggle is when you're doing that from scratch. If you have experience, there's a big tendency to lean in and do it on behalf of the other people, which is a trap, from a leadership perspective, because you're not building any opportunity to practice, take feedback, think about how they could have a first try and a second, a third to be able to get to a canvas or a funnel or a pipeline plan or something, closer to what you had in mind. Which is, I think, especially, up against the, short term, I'm sure you've got some pretty strong conversion metrics, new business stuff, CPAs that you're trying to keep down. How do you do that furiously, whilst building a team? I think there's a real balance. It is very difficult to do without having some structure in your team or people that you can lean on, but in support and advice, as opposed to the doing, and then have the patience and resilience, to step back and listen, help them make mistakes safely, and obviously bring them up. But that is easier to do once you've got the team in place or the potential in place for the talent. But in absence of that, when you're scrambling on new customers for corporate cards, as fast as you guys would be, it's probably frenetic. How do you see that tension?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm also like a believer in that you can be a leader without being a people manager, as in you can go be the go-to product marketer for your product domain and go toe-to-toe with like the product lead every day in terms of influencing the product roadmap, while also coaching the more junior members of the team on what good or world-class looks like at product marketing, which is a real benefit to the sort of situation that you described, where you're a manager, you're trying to sort of develop a team while also set the strategy and execute on the strategy of the team. I think those kind of like independent contributor leaders are really like important in a product marketing team.
Yeah. I might go back to some of the conversations that we had before around tooling. There's some great suppliers outside, and you're new into Playo. I'm certainly scrambling to try and bring tooling together, where I am. Is there a tool that you wouldn't want to do without where you are at the moment, or perhaps that they don't have, which you'd like to put in next?
Well, I mean, they've got, so like G2s are really first, like even before joining, kind of a really good source of information for getting up to speed on kind of how customers are talking about your product, what their pain points are, what they love about you, and then going and doing that same exercise with your competitors to really just be like, okay, what are we saying about ourselves? Like, what are the conversations I should be having with product? Why is that thing not working the way it should, or why do we always get kind of feedback on this area? And so, I mean, Pleo has G2 and is using it pretty well, so that's been really good for like getting up to speed quickly, and which is you want to do when you're like a new product marketer at a company. Tools that we don't have that I'm going to be championing. I think the one that comes to mind is like launch notes, or there's like alternatives to launch notes. But I really like the idea of a public product roadmap. It doesn't need to be exact. It doesn't need to have your secret stuff on it. But just to give your customers that overview that we are going to be continuing to add value to the product over the next 12 months. We listen to you when you ask us for features, we commit to them, but being really transparent, saying we're working on this, we're not working on this, we're thinking about this is just shipped. And launch notes is quite a sort of a cool new way of doing that. It's very slick. I think like Loom and Hopin are using it. And so I think once I've got my head around the product roadmap, and maybe that'll be after my second month, I might start to advocate for that and try and coax some very nervous product managers into committing to that, because that's a big conversation to have.
No, it's we were talking before over lunch with someone else around product marketing potentially being that voice of customer at scale, and then in order to be able to bring in the rest of the business that don't understand what product marketing is, potentially by representing that in the form of the roadmap, or you can then sort of use case validate through surveys and voice of customer to see what should be built next, as a way to be able to bring the business along to go, oh, that's what product marketing is. Thought it was something else, which takes me to the top question here.
It's flown up, hasn't it? Look at that.
Pay differences and this rise in popularity, or how do you compete for product marketers? Think about sort of wolves in sheep's clothing and vice versa, I guess, in the marketing cohorts around the world, where potentially former communication managers might be rebadging themselves as product marketers.
It's so in demand at the moment. And so as a hiring manager, so having just been in the jobs market as someone looking for a job and then flipping to someone now hiring, and there's a lot of jobs flying around, and I think you have to sell the opportunity. So that's my challenge. I think you have to make it a really, and so to put myself in your shoes, it's like what should we be looking for? I think you've got a lot of choice out there with your next role as a product marketer. So really think about what it is you want, like what the parts of product marketing is. This vast role of everything from pricing and competitive intelligence to being creative and playing with words. What is it you enjoy? What are companies that you could get passionate about doing that thing at? Are you looking to learn by being with leaders who've done it before? Or are you looking to learn by being the first person to do it? Because that's very stressful, but you get to learn a lot. So it's really about it's a very different experience from small company to big company, based on industry, based on does leadership get product marketing, or is that going to be part of the job? Are you going to have to sell that in? So we're sport for choice really right now in our discipline. So I definitely spend a lot of time thinking about that next role before jumping in.
So I think that sort of leads to this idea of there's a question here. I'll take.
Please do.
On product marketing team structure. Especially in the absence of lots of talent in the space that's proven. I think there's a great development opportunity to be able to recognize, potential. I think on bringing in people into a team structure for product marketing that is going to work. I think, in my experience, there's a big difference between having an ideal team structure and then being able to find the right people to fill it. In reality, in my experience, what tends to happen is you find someone that has the right attitude or is thinking in the right way to be able to fill a gap on something in the product marketing sphere. So whether it's, demand gen, taking someone from sales enablement or from consumer marketing who sweat conversions when it's about online acquisition, into a B2B demand gen role would fit quite nicely. Making sure you have content covered, but you don't have someone that's scratching their head on what the brand should look like for 6 months. It's probably not going to work well in a product marketing context. But marketing ops, talking about tools, making sure you've got, someone in team that can cut segments, put in canvases on whatever tool you happen to be using for campaigning out, plug in your events platforms into your CRM, make sure attribution's in place, if you're using intent, pull all that together. So you need someone with some technical skills, like as an analyst or someone that knows SQL, to come into the team to be able to help shape that. So there's certainly, I think there needs to be skills around tech. There needs to be skills around content. There's got to be skills around sales, but digital sales, potentially also being able to face back into an internal sales business to have those tough conversations, or if they're doing enterprise piece. But I tend to go towards a fairly flat structure. But I think in my definition of product marketing, and I know there's a lot here, you couldn't have structure in a product marketing team without tech covered, demand gen covered, content covered, in that structure. And I think the biggest question for me becomes, in which order can you build that out in order to be able to answer the last question we talked about, where leadership, that difference between leadership and product marketing sits.
Yeah, totally. I think because we've grown as a product-led company where product is king and you have product domains. I think the question, and I think probably a lot of people have thought about this experience, this is like, to what extent should product marketing be integrated with product as well? And so the way I think about it is, like, I think an ideal scenario is where you have a product marketing team, but then you have some product marketers embedded in product squads, being the go-to person for those squads and knowing the domain inside out. And so and then there's that question of, where should product marketing even live? Should it be in product? Should it be in marketing? Should it be somewhere else?
Yep.
Or does it get moved around every 4 years, like at Sage?
That's the other question. I think that's a really good way to think about the definition of product marketing. Where do you go to and when? Because where I am at the moment, we are trying to solve the tension between sales and technology, because quite often technology have been having to make product decisions, whereas they'd prefer just to make really good technology. So things like even UI, product-led requirements, they were making it up, quite frankly. Building stuff they're not sure of, or taking requirements from sales, which is feature-led, and definitely not scalable. So we can help settle the tension between those two parts of the business. by representing voice of the customer to prioritize the backlog. So tech can go, right, okay, they're clear now, we'll just build the best possible thing at the top of the stack. But I think it depends. You know, if you're in a business where, you know, it's tech-led, you know, what's the role of product marketing in that situation? If it's, you know, if you're you know, if you depend on high street retail, or if you're just a pure online e-commerce provider, then what's the role of product marketing then when you potentially have a really strong digital marketing business, but they're detached from brand or product or communications? Then, yeah, I think, you know, someone before said, where do you go to and how do you best represent, I think is a question.
Nice.
We have we've got 10 votes from Eve. When recruiting for your team, what skills with marketing do you look for if people haven't had specific PMM roles before? What about internal recruitment? Rory, you're doing a lot of recruitment right now.
Yeah.
No doubt you'd love people to apply for Playo, just like I would,
like, I
to
need a
apply for
stand
roles
like
in my
High
team.
Spot.
For what roles are you looking for? Where do you start? Where's your cut line when you're looking at CVs, or you've got recruiters sending stuff through to you? Where do you say yes or no to?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's something you can like passively transition to. You can obviously like move from another marketing discipline to product marketing, but I don't think you can just go, oh yeah, that's what I do. I think you need to be very intentional about that and learn what it is, what the definition is, and then be about that. But obviously there's a lot of transferable skills, and product marketers are sort of by their nature often generalists. For me, being great at copy is always a huge advantage because there's just so much involved in the role. Being analytical, being comfortable, presenting is often very useful, and just having an enthusiasm for collaboration. So these are soft skills, but I think they're important. And internal recruitment is often a really good route because, especially if you're looking to staff up quickly, because product marketing often wants to be the most knowledgeable team in the business about the product, maybe other than the product, and connects with product. And so bringing people into your team that have been around at the company for a couple of years and have that head start on how the company works, I definitely don't think it's like something you can wing.
And do you look for, what's the word, probably, you know, people that have a particular lean or capability or tendency to solve problems in a particular way, or is there a I mean, I can sort of rhetorically,
please do,
sort of describe the sorts of things that I look for customer focus. Like and that's the thing that's come through here, I think, today for me, is sort of validating that role of always making sure that you're prioritizing customer interactions. You know, it's like brand marketers doing everything they can for PR. You know, when the PR request comes through from a tier one, that's all you're doing now. You know, and I think whether they're from HR or finance, like if I'm recruiting internally, if they're obsessed with customer experience, and they're also got an aptitude for numbers, I think those two things, they could, especially if they like engagement, which I think is the North Star that I've certainly focused.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in a situation where revenue is everything, and of course, if you're an accountant, that's true. You know, but if you work in marketing, then I would describe engagement, customer engagement, as our North Star. Probably all of us would probably share that in common. You know, but so if you have a customer obsession, if you're really interested in great customer experience, if you have an aptitude for numbers, then I think potentially those two things, you know, can come together in the form of potential.
It's a great start, yeah, for sure. I think we might have time for one more question based on
we're getting
the signals I'm getting. Which one do you fancy?
Why don't we go for from Danny Wills? Product marketing is an all-encompassing role. How do we hold ourselves back by naming it product marketing? It's a great question. I love that question. It's. I threw out a blog actually on the difference between marketing and product marketing. You know, describing it as trying to compare donkeys to horses. They kind of have four legs. You know, from a distance, they probably look exactly the same. You know, but when you get closer to it, there's some differences that become more obvious, I think, and there's certain themes that we've described here. But I don't know. I'd love to go back to Danny and ask, you know, what did he have in mind? You know, where do we take it? I guess I'd probably go back to the business to ask, so what would product marketing, should it be named? I don't know, Rory, how would you answer that question?
Just like the herding cats department or something. It's very vague. Some people think it's the marketing that goes on within the product. Some people think it's just the marketing of the product. We've got a lot more, as has been covered in other talks, marketing of the function itself to do, and it will come. But I think go work out what it means to you, like at your company, and then really carve out time to go explain that to people. And that whole thing of like you need to communicate it like 3 times to every person at the company or whatever. Yeah. So continually beat that drum.
That's great. And you've got a great blog which I follow, by the way. If you're not following Rory's blog, then
thanks. I wasn't asking for the plug, but the Product Marketer.
You should check
on
it
Substack.
So that's the Product Marketer on.
theproductmarketer.substack.com.
There you go.
All right.
Great.
Thank you guys, Justin and Michael. Thank you. Round of applause. Thank you very much. We're just going to have a 1-minute changeover because we can get the chairs off the stage.